They say gay culture is being ignored by the guy who's being ignored by the guy you're ignoring. Now that we've fixed gay conformity in our last 15-minute video, this week we're going to tackle and fix gay insecure attachment. Go us!
Once upon a time in a fabulous land, where morals are sparkly and fables are grand, gaze up's tales with a wise man's twist, serving wisdom on a glittery dish.
Hello my Fabies, and welcome back to Gaysop's Fables. Or if it's your first time here, welcome forward. This is your weekly dose of classic tales with a modern gay twist. This is just a cute little corner of the internet away from the news where we go back to storytelling 101. Exploring deep issues in the gay community, but in a cutesy, allegorical way. I'm Matt, your modern day fabulist, and I'm here to read some tales that I've written, to touch on some theory that I've studied, and to indulgently talk about how these phenomena have affected my life. In many ways, I'm just another YouTuber dishing out life lessons through a microphone. I may be white, but I'm not 23. I'm more of a good lord, a lot of shit has happened to me, and if I hadn't learned from it, I'd be in the shower, eating ice cream and crying right now. But there's always time for that later. I like to observe our community and people in general, and possibly naively, I like to think that occasionally I have something meaningful to say about it. I also love fairy tales, fables, and anything really that can tell me what I should do through story as opposed to direct instruction. Today I will be reading The Tortoise and the Hare. Huh? Sound familiar? Where the little gay fox who found it hard to love, episode 1, was an original title but an adapted story. This Tortoise and the Hare is a ripped off title and a completely original story. I'll keep you guessing. There once was an energetic young hare. He was a true romantic. He would bound around the forests and fields with a song in his heart and a dream in his head. He was a social little pseudo-rabbit and was very active on the woodland gay scene. He seemed to be looking for love in all the wrong places. His friends, various woodland creatures, too many to describe, couldn't begin to describe, used to tell him that he would only go after animals if they were emotionally unavailable. He was a bull in a china shop of red flags. He had been with armadillos, turtles, pangolins, but for some reason he just couldn't get through to them and couldn't get them to connect the way he desperately wanted. Recently, he had been seeing a very sexy hummingbird, but it hadn't worked out. The hummingbird was a recovering nectar addict and just needed to stay off the scene. That's right, crossover! Gaysop Cinematic Universe, the GCU. With each failed attempt, he became more and more anxious that this maybe just wouldn't happen for him. There once also was a sluggish old tortoise. He would plod around the woods, quite happy in his own company. He was contented by the sounds of the whistling wind through the wooded trees and the quiet still of a sunrise in the glen. He had always been a loner, and though he frequently dated, had never made it past the 3-month mark. He had dated roadrunners, ostriches, cheetahs, but they just seemed to want to move too fast. His friends would tell him he just needs to let someone in and lower his standards if he ever wants to be happy. He liked the idea of being with someone, but after each failed attempt he became more withdrawn and a little bit more certain that relationships may not be for him. And so they each lived separate lives and never met. The end. I am obviously joking. One night out at popular gay club, The Fairy Ring, the tortoise and the hare locked eyes for the first time. Their hare was being his usual self, hopping about, making friends, dancing the night away. The tortoise spotted him and thought, Wow, the life of the party. Look how easily he makes friends and expresses himself. Wish I could be like that. Meanwhile, the hare saw the tortoise from across the room and thought, look at that stoicism. Look at that cool, calm confidence. I wish I could have that. Eventually, they found themselves standing next to one another. They even managed to strike up a conversation. The tortoise stood, strong, relaxed. He wanted to convey a nonchalant demeanor. The hare wanted to show off his coy, flirty side. He bent one ear down and made sure his fluffy tail was erect and prominent, like a sexy cloud of cotton candy. He really hoped the tortoise was into scut play. A hare's tail is called a scut. You can look it up. Eventually, they kissed. The hare was exhilarated. He had been working so hard to try and win the tortoise over all night. The tortoise was exhilarated. He was still capable of those little butterflies in his shell. They exchanged numbers, a plan suggested by the hare, of course, and agreed to meet up later in the week. Oh. The hare woke up, excited. The next day, he could message the tortoise. He sent a "Good morning, Mr. Tortoise" message to the tortoise, who was also waking up. Oh. The tortoise read the message and smiled. He actually got a bit of some fuzzy feelings. And they had a great conversation all day, back and forth. The hare felt like he was getting to know the tortoise, but more importantly to the hare, that he was able to express himself and be known. He was able to show how funny, caring, thoughtful, witty, and responsive he was. But the next day, the communication changed. He messaged the tortoise in the morning. "Good morning, you sexy tortoise. I'm as hard as your shell just thinking about you." But he didn't hear back. He kept checking his phone every few minutes, but he didn't hear from the tortoise all day. The hare's heart sank. He had been here before. He kicked himself for being too text-friendly. He worried that he'd pushed too hard or shown too much of himself. What have I done wrong? Meanwhile, over at Casa Tortoise, the tortoise had started to withdraw again. It started enjoying the banter, but the more text that was sent trying to engage him and wow him, the less he was enjoying the conversation. The tortoise decided he needed to create some space. This was not his first rodeo either, and he subconsciously had a bag full of strategies in his shell. I'll just not read the text for a few hours and then read it and then wait a few hours to respond. That will send the right message. Would you believe the tortoise felt relieved by his plan? If you'd asked him, he would have just said, "I'm too busy to respond to the hare all day," even though it was the exact same level of busyness as the day before and he was responding just fine. The texts became fewer and more spaced apart. It had now been 2 days since the hare had heard from the tortoise. The hare had noticed the change in communication, but he was so hesitant to point it out in case he pushed the tortoise even further away. He felt like he was going crazy. So he made a pact with himself not to respond. It took all of his willpower. He would see a funny meme, desperately want to use it to try and engage the tortoise, and have to slap his little paw away. He came so close so many times and had to talk himself off the ledge and back into the grass. He managed to get through the whole week without responding, and truthfully, after a couple of days, it got a bit easier. The tortoise, on the other hand, was actually a bit surprised not to hear from the hare. He started thinking more fondly of those earlier interactions. He remembered the hare's energy and vibrancy, and the intensity of the messaging started to get a little less intense in the tortoise's eyes and mind. He felt a sudden openness to dating again, and he thought, the hare is just the animal to do it with. He texted the hare back, casually not acknowledging the time that had passed or the change in his communication. "Hey, how's your week?" The hare saw the text arrive on his android, and his heart leapt as high as a hare in the long grass. He went back to text immediately, but instead decided to let the tortoise sweat it out for a little while. Side note, do tortoises sweat? I have absolutely no idea. He put his phone down, confident in the knowledge that he now held the cards. He waited until he'd finished work when he crafted a witty and slightly passive-aggressive response to the tortoise. He smugly hit send, and then his anxiety set in again. But the tortoise hadn't really noticed a delay in the response, and when he did read it, he found himself closing up again. The rush of desire had come and gone as quickly as the breeze. And eventually, the tortoise stopped responding altogether. The hare was crushed, but he knew how to handle this, having gone through this exact situation so many times before. He put on a brave face and broke the news to all of his friends who had been expecting it, and went out to face the day and the world a little less hopeful. After a few months of no contact, the tortoise messaged the hare just to see how he was doing. The hare looked at the message and deleted it. I think it's pretty obvious what the moral of this story is. If it isn't emotionally challenging, it isn't worth it. The real moral we're discussing today is that cycles can be broken. You knew this was coming. The attachment episode, you knew this was coming. And so we talk about attachment theory. Second, probably only to narcissism, attachment theory is the most overused pop psych term in current modern dating, gay, straight, all of the above. People use attachment theory to explain their failed dates. With good reason. It's really f***ing good at explaining them. Personally, I found it very helpful to explain my endless string of inappropriate connections. For those unfamiliar, attachment theory describes how a person's early experiences with a caregiver can shape and mold their emotional and relationship patterns for their entire life. So it can feel like a life sentence or a life blessing, depending on which one you end up with. You want the good one. You want the good one. We'll get there. We have secure attachment. These babies were held, and held consistently. Moving on, we have anxious attachment, characterized by an intense fear of rejection and abandonment, and a strong desire to be close to their partner and seek reassurance at all costs. Anxious attachers can very easily get fixated on their relationships, and it quickly starts to define their self-worth. And finally, we have avoidant attachment. This is characterized by a strong desire for independence and an avoidance of emotional closeness and vulnerability. These guys are used to doing things by themselves, and in fact, they don't trust other people to do these things for them. Unfortunately, fortunately, the way that secure people tend to attract secure people, anxious attachers tend to find avoidant attachers. And if left untreated, these crazy kids can get stuck in what I call the loop of despair, otherwise known as the anxious avoidant cycle. Here it is depicted as a slow descent into despair. In the anxious avoidant cycle, the avoidant or anxious person either can start it. Let's start with the anxious person. The anxious person gets a little bit too needy, triggering off the avoidant person to feel like they need to withdraw. That withdrawal intensifies the anxious person's neediness, and they look for even more closeness, more reassurance, and the avoidant creates more space. Basically, everyone ends up feeling really fucking shit about themselves. Both the anxious and avoidant seemingly get off on the thrill and the highs of this cycle of coming together, spending time apart. The avoidant suddenly reaches out and the anxious person feels like they've won them over again. The anxious person gives the avoidant some space and the avoidant recharges and thinks, oh, actually I can do this. And it just perpetuates this cycle of shit. But this discussion can all feel a little bit clinical and detached. So I'm going to break form a little bit today. He says 4 episodes in, 3 episodes in. Is there form yet? I'm doing something different today that may or may not become a regular thing. I consulted with some friends who meet the criteria of these 2 archetypes, and I've got some very special insider information from a very intimate perspective from someone very close to me. It's me. A letter from an avoidant. When I first met you, I thought you were great. You were fun and warm and open with your emotions, all of the things that I struggle with from time to time. I liked that you liked me. But soon after, things started to change for me. When you respond after 2 minutes after I've left you waiting for 4 hours, it freaks me out. I like it when you show interest, but it's a really fine line between interest and too much interest. I start to feel really overwhelmed, and what started off as fun really starts to weigh on me. It starts to feel like a burden, and deep down I worry that I'm going to let you down. I like to know that you have a life outside of me, so I don't feel responsible for you. I think I'm more comfortable with the idea of a relationship than the reality. So I stopped responding, and you kept replying to yourself, and eventually you stopped responding. I try not to think about you very often, but when I do, I'm kind of kicking myself. You were fucking great, and I fucked it up. And now I feel even less enthusiastic about a relationship in future. Shit, that just got a bit real, didn't it? Woo! And now for some more light-hearted fun, a letter from an anxious person, those crazy To all of the men I have pursued with gusto, get over yourselves. I wish I could say that I pursued you because I was obsessed with you or because you're great, but unfortunately, you keeping me at arm's length was the greatest aphrodisiac I could possibly imagine. You could be an emotionally unavailable toaster and I would be there trying to warm my bagels. I saw the incompatibility, of course I did. It's just that I was programmed to try and win you over. Instead of just being with someone who treats me as worthy, what a fun challenge to pick someone who doesn't treat me as worthy and to win them over until I convince them and myself that I'm worthy. Treat! I'm sorry I got us into this, as it was me who convinced you to date me. You probably showed the first signs of interest, but it would definitely have been me who rushed us into something before I even thought about whether it was something that I wanted or needed. Deep down, I was looking to be chosen above all others. I wasn't actually looking for a commitment. So today I'm actually not going to touch on how to break these cycles beyond starting to become aware of them, because that's far more work than we're going to get done in this allotted slot. But I will just say, an interesting observation, I think it's interesting. My observation that I think is interesting is that in the gay community, possibly the straight, we've been over this, I don't know, they've got their own channels, I don't care. We seem to have sort of demonized the anxious person, labeling them as desperate and needy and uncool and tragic. All fair. In some weird ways, we've also sort of glamorized the avoidant, that sort of cool, aloof. They come across as confident, but deep down just as insecure as the anxious. They just don't wear it on their sleeve, they keep it inside. But it's a really interesting thing. They leave us in want of more, so we glamorize it and we almost fetishize it in a sort of weird way. But at the end of the day, both styles are designed to keep us from real connections. One makes it very obvious by creating a space between himself and that connection, and the other does it in a sort of slyer way, because it looks like they're trying to connect, but they're going after inappropriate connections. They're going after connections that can't possibly be, which is also keeping them from a real one. Both styles leave the gay deflated, scarred, and even more certain of their unworthiness and unsuitability to be loved, or to love. So step one in changing, I think you know. So thanks for tuning in, Fabies. It really means a lot. If you do like this content, I've got more planned. I'm planning on doing a 10-episode season and a few expert and friend interviews to keep it going between seasons. And we do a bit of a deep dive into some of these themes that I'm not glossing over, but introducing in a light touch way. If you do like, please do subscribe. I'd love to see some more comments because we can engage. I'd love to having these discussions. I can't make money off these videos. I'm on a skilled worker visa and I can't have a secondary income. So you know I'm doing this for love and to share some hopeful wisdom. Hopefully some wisdom. Some of it might be hopeful with the world, and just because I love it. So tune in next week where we'll be solving the riddle of what is a scene friend and what is a true friend. Ooh, have a moral week.
On a glittery dish. Gaze of fables, it's the tea, it's the show. Lessons in love with a fabulous glow. Quick wit, sharp, he'll strut the moral road. Gather round, hun, let the gay story unfold.